Now in the long, dark nights between Shamhna, Halloween, and New Year's about, the Irish supernatural is on the move. We include in that Nadini Maya, the good folk. We include in that the ghosts, the souls of the departed. And we also include in that other creatures, otherworldly creatures that are also to be encountered in these long, dark nights. So today I want to share some Irish folklore with you about this time and those encounters. I want to tell you a story from Donegal about one such encounter, and I want to reflect with you about what this seasonal folklore, the season of Samhain, offers to us as creative people. So Fáilte a Chairde, welcome my friends. I'm so glad you're here as ever. My name is Kate. I am a professor of Irish language and folklore, and like everyone here, I'm a multi-passionate creative person who loves to make things. And I love to see this channel as sitting at the crossroads between Irish tradition and creative living. So wonderful to have you with me today. We're talking today about Samhain season, the season of Halloween. And again, Samhain is the whole month of November, but it's also the first day of November. But it really kicks off on Shamhna, which is Halloween, so Samhain Eve. Now, this time of year was considered to be a time for drawing close, a time of belonging, but it was also a time in which you had to be careful, according to folklore, about night and about the road. I loved reading years ago about a pair of weavers in County Armagh who would go to bed early every Halloween night to escape, as they put it, fairy annoyance. So that is marvelous. We know that the fairies themselves are on the move at this time, and I'm actually going to read you a little, this is my dissertation, I'm going to read you a little passage, a quote that is in my dissertation. This is part of the Irish Folklore Commission's questionnaire. Marcin O'Congla of County Mayo said this, and I'm just going to read you a little in Irish because it's so good. Jeru na shandini go meak shul mór, da yanu ag lucht na lissana an Oíche sin, agus jeir siad gurbi sin an Oíche a astrian siad o ach go hach ella. The old people used to say that the she-folk, the fairies, used to make a procession that night, and they say that is that night, Halloween, that they move from place to place. So they're out on the roads, and you want to be careful about that. Now, here is a little account of a man who was caught up in it. So Knock Sauna, which would mean Halloween Hill. Croc or Knock is a hill. Sauna is of Samhain. Knock Sauna, a large hill about 5 miles outside of Rathlurk, is generally supposed to get its name from the legend that the fairies whose fort it was went in procession around the hill every November Eve. One year, a man returning home after midnight was forced to join in the march and walk around it 3 times. And of course, that's loaded, isn't it? The movement, that 3 times of going around something. Now, if you're going the right-hand wise, it's called jashel, which means like with the sun. If you're going the other way around, the left-hand wise, it's tuafail, and it's sort of unlucky. In this case, I suspect, although it's not said, a lot of times we know that the fairies, when they sort of want to open the wildness and energy of the fairy mound, they go the left-hand wise. It's sort of like unscrewing the jar, maybe, as it will, the jar of supernatural energy. So there's so much lore about the fairies moving. They move from house to house at this time. They say that they move from their summer house to their winter house, that all of these encounters of people meeting fairies and the dead, and even things called arachta, which are sort of just supernatural monsters, on the road at this time. And of course, the danger is that when you meet them, you could be a victim of what we call fairy stroke, like a little pebble or some small flying object strikes you, and then you have an ulcer or a sore that does not heal. That's fairy stroke. And then there's just plain old fairy abduction, the idea that you'll be taken away, and we'll talk more about that. Finally, before I tell you the story, I wanted to bring in this idea that, of course, at this time, human beings deliberately embody and express the energy of the otherworld. They dress up deliberately to be otherworldly. So at the same time as all these tales talk to us about the fairies on the move, so are human beings trying to get in on the act, as it were, and dressing up. And I'm just going to read you one last little passage. This is Thomas P. McGarry of County Westmeath, and this is a passage from 1943. He says, "There is a tradition that people used to go about to the houses on that night," and that's trick-or-treating. "They represented themselves as the fairies." He couldn't make it more explicit. They were called fairy boys. Old people used to say, "The fairy boys will be out dressed in the straw." Now, straw costumes are actually used, or were actually used traditionally all through the festival year in Ireland. So here they are again. But the fairy boys will be out dressed in the straw. These boys pretended to be ghosts. Now, all of that, okay, so Tomas is making very explicit that when people go out to do Halloween mischief, it's not quite our trick-or-treat here with little tiny kids in pumpkin costumes being adorable, but this is rowdier. This is, there are more tricks than treats involved here. There's a sense of license and permission to act a little bit different than quite a bit different, and to explicitly style yourself as an otherworldly person. Now, the second point to make out of that, you might notice that Tomas also says the old people said that they dressed themselves as ghosts. So notice this combination, this ambiguity of fairies and ghosts, because we see it everywhere. We're never, I suppose I won't say we're never quite sure, but there is a lot of crossover between fairies and then people who have been taken by fairies, and then the idea of the dead themselves. And this is not a problem in my mind, because it's all in the realm of the other. So with all of that in mind, I want to tell you a little story from Donegal. It's in the Síscéalta Oíche, which is the fairy legends from Donegal. Once, long ago, there was a strange young man. He liked to go and gather sand eels on the strand, but he would not go down to the strand if he thought that other people would be there before him. Bhí sé rudbeg cúr mar sin. He was a little bit odd like that. Well, one Shamhna, on a Halloween night, he decided that he'd go down to the strand by himself and dig for sand eels. And so he got his knife and he got his bucket, and down he went. Now, other people wouldn't have dreamed of going to the strand that night. Most of the men were tired because they were out digging in the potato rills, finishing up the harvest, which should be done by now. And the women had so many things to do at home at night. And besides, there was night visiting and storytelling and people being together. But not for this boy, this young man. So down he goes to the strand, and he is just beginning to dig for sand eels when he hears some strange toru, strange noise, gibberishke, weird sounds coming from further down the strand. And when he looks up, he can see that the whole strand, the place right between the water and the earth, is full of people. And he's shocked because he would never have come down there if he'd known there'd be people. But somehow it infuriates him, and he starts to move toward them. He's sort of magnetized to move toward them. He's moving toward them, and they seem to be moving away. And he moves toward them, and they move away. On and on and on. He comes to a particular rock, and still he's moving toward them, and they're moving away. And he doesn't even realize that he's standing up to his hips in the water. Well, just at that moment, lucky for him, a man rose up before him and he said, "Go on home now. I know your mother. She was kind to me in life, and I will never let you be taken by them, because if they take you tonight, they'll have one more in their number before dawn. Go on home now where you belong, and let me never see you come back to the strand alone again." And so the young man listened. He listened to this old friend of his mother's who had been gone many, many years, and he went home. And I hear that shortly after that, he moved to America, and they never heard from him again. And it's many, many years since the green sod was lain over him. Shine mashkielsa matabrig an biu. That's my story. If there's a lie in it, so be it. Now, I find that to be quite a moving story, and it shows us, I always say, when we talk about fairies, if the fairies are in your life, it's because there's a gap, there's a problem, there's an issue, there's something missing. We can see what it is here. One, he is out of the circle of belonging, right? He is insisting on solitude. And if one thing I can tell you from Irish folklore, there is a great mistrust of solitude. Solitude is dangerous. We go astray. That is the feeling. We need each other. People live in each other's shadow. We need each other. He is rejecting all of that very actively, and the tale lets us know very explicitly that he would not have gone to the strand if he had thought there would be people there. Now, the deep irony is that when he finds that there are people there of a sort, and they are Dini Bega Dini Uashla Nafarige Gamleshkil, they are the fairy people of the sea. When he finds that there are people there, he cannot stop himself from going toward them. So you can see here how this idea of the gap, right? Like human people, he's not attracted to, but this other world, these other people, he is powerless to resist them. So that is one of the real gaps here. And the other gap is that he's out of tune with the season. It's not the time to be digging sand eels. It's the time to be at home. Everyone else is finishing the harvest or doing their chores or readying the house for winter, and he is insisting on going to the shore on Oíche. So that's the kind of thing that is going to invoke the presence of the other world. I find that quite a sad story for myself, although there is a little bit of hope in it, isn't there? What I mean is that the boy's loneliness, this young man's loneliness, this young man's sense of being solitary and unfriended somehow, whether he won't let that in or others won't, we don't know. But there's something sad about that and out of step. However, possibly at the end when he goes to America, we don't know. Maybe he's learned. Let's say he learned. So what can we take from all of this? We creative people, you creative person who's watching this, and thank you for watching. What can we take? I think we get a kind of doubleness from the folklore of this time that I want to highlight. We have the imperative to belonging. Be with people, connect, take your place at the hearth. And then we have permission to be and express otherness. That wildness and license of Nadini Maya, that you can dress up and go around doing tricks. And let me just give you one example of a trick. They loved the fairy boys, or these people who were wearing straw, or what they called the eye fidgel. They love to call a person in a mask a fiddle face, and an eye fiddle. Eye fidgel is a fiddle face, literally, a mask. These people would do all kinds of tricks, and one that I think is really symbolic and interesting is that they would take the gates off of things. Now, of course, that meant for chaos on a farm. But also there's something about the betwixt and between of this time that makes taking a gate off just a perfect thing. It's saying we're coming through. This otherness, this wildness and license is coming in. And it does come in, doesn't it? As much as we want to say we're in charge, this time of the year in the folklore of Ireland says we're not completely in charge. And there is otherness, there are surprises, there is chaos, there are hard decisions to be made, there is unpredictability. So if we as creative people can straddle these two ways of being, the way of being which is belonging and the way of being which is otherness, which is allowing some license in yourself, I think that's what we can take from this, because that otherness is invigorating and that belonging is loving and safe. So that's my question for you today. How can you, on the one hand, embody and express that belonging in your creative life? Take that any way you want. It might be that you decide you want to join a group. It might be that you decide you want to spend some time sending your poems or your songs to a friend. Whatever it is, belonging. Or maybe you want to come home and write something or express something about that sense of being safe at home, especially while the dark is out there. And then on the other hand, how can you embody and express that sense of otherness, that wildness and license, either in your creative work itself or possibly in your life? So I hope that gets you thinking. I would love to hear what you have to say. Thank you as ever for liking this video. It really does help me. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for your comments. I love the discussions we're having. I value you so much. And if you haven't, please do subscribe and join us here. And we'd love to have you in our merry band that really is made up of belonging and a little bit of wildness. So thank you as ever for watching. I hope you have a wonderful week and a little bit of magic in it too. All right, my friends, see you next week.